You won't have enough money to feed your kids using this currency. The governor of the Central Bank of France, Ibrahim, with a smile. Traore displayed the new conversely banknotes with this money. Our kids will eventually get to see the day's actual worth of their own fortune. Sankara Franc, who was supported by gold, went in circulation, signified more than simply money shift, but the conclusion of 60 years at the conference room and economic colonialism in Burkina Faso's presidential residence. It was an exceptionally busy morning in Faso. Ibrahim Traore had called upon his financial cabinet ministers, advisors, and central bank representatives for what he explained exclusively in the interest of national sovereignty. The tense atmosphere was caused by expectation. At exactly 908 am, Traore came in with a plain folder, adorned with the national symbol instead. Rather than occupying his usual position he stood at the head of the table, his face conveying the seriousness of what he intended to suggest. For 64 years since we supposedly gained our independence, he started by saying Burkina Faso has never really the CFA franc had control over its own funds. Created in 1945 by France for its colonies are still used as money today. We don't print our own currency. Money with monetary policy that is he opened in Paris instead of Ouagadougou. The folder and presented a number of documents on the table that we must have to retain. Half of our foreign currency, the French treasuries reserves. We have to keep the exchange rate constant with our central bank's euro has restricted liberty to determine interest rates or oversee inflation. His tone stayed calm, yet had a strong belief that this is not the configuration of separate countries are engaging in economic colonization. By Finance Minister Traore is also known as a prominent economist who received his education at the with hesitation Sorbonne, held up his hand. Mr. President, even though I agree with your evaluation of the CFA arrangement as well ensures a steady and regular interchange, low inflation, and trade rates modifying this system would result in substantial dangers. Traore nodded, recognizing the point. In fact, that's the deal that has been presented to us is surrender, economic independence in return for stability. But I want to know whether this has stability brought us prosperity. People have been doing this for 60 years. Burkina Faso was excised from poverty. The subsequent quiet was sufficient response. Even though you have substantial stockpiles of gold and other, Burkina Faso's natural resources remained among the poorest countries in the world. Traore went on today, and I'm suggesting what some might consider extreme, but what I evaluate Burkina Faso's long overdue launch. Its own independent currency, the Sankara Franc, is named after our revolutionary figurehead who initially ventured to imagine that the room is truly independent. Central bank murmuring erupted. Governor Ouagadougou appeared especially worried. Mr. President, establishing a new currency demands a great deal of planning, would require sufficient reserves, robust worldwide recognition. All of the institutions were interrupted by Traore, which explains why this won't occur. I suggest a 2-year transition overnight plan. He indicated the papers before in the first phase. He increased our gold reserves by nationalizing mining activities and forcing Burkina Faso to generate all gold. Faso will be sold to the nationals first. Treasury Phase 2. Create a period of independent monetary authority. 3. We print our own money, supported by economic planning and physical gold reserves. Director Sankara has nothing to do with a revolutionary leader posed the query. Everyone was contemplating what would happen in response. France's CFA arrangement is constricted by global accords. They will not just let us leave. Traore's face became a little more stern. Expect strong opposition to both France's economic and diplomatic advantages. Deviation from the CFA framework, managing the 14th century's monetary policies. Preferential treatment for African countries. Access to our resources being received. They will receive billions in segregated earnings. Not voluntarily give up these advantages. The next 3 hours of the meeting focused on exploring the potential technical specifics, challenges, and tactical methods by its ending. Even though it lingers issues, a consensus had been reached over. The crucial moment for monetary sovereignty was necessary for complete independence. In any of the difficulties, as the official submitted, Traore asked the governor of the central bank, Ouagadougou, to stay behind. Following their, Traore spoke more openly about you alone have concerns, Governor. I must. Ouagadougou let out a long sigh upon hearing them. Honestly, I support the vision, Mr. President, but the global financial system is able to show no mercy to African countries that contest its regulations. which they can limit availability of quick banking systems, reduce the block on our credit rating. Capital is triggered by foreign borrowing. Flight. He stopped. They have instruments to produce the exact instability. That would demonstrate that we require their supervision. Listen carefully. And if we move forward in spite of these dangers, we have to be ad rego, ready for economic war just responded, and we have to have backup strategies for each possible assault throughout the ensuing months. Preparation started in complete secrecy. Special committee of economists and lawyers, security officials, and specialists collaborated to create a new money as well as an all-encompassing plan to safeguard the economy of Burkina Faso. During the transition, the initial indication to the public of what was approaching took place 6 months later when Traore declared that the terms of all contracts for foreign mining under the new conditions, at least 51% of the property would move to the state of Burkina Faso and 25% would be sold out of all the gold mined straight to the treasury of the country. At the global response to market rates was mining firms that are quick and reliable, threatening to stop operations that the IMF warned about investing. Decline of the climate in French media referred to the relocation as a resource nationalism that is detrimental to Burkina. The economic strategy of Faso tackled these forthright criticism in a national broadcast for many years. By international firms have taken our gold away while our citizens stayed impoverished and lost their fortune. The first thing that belongs beneath our soil is the Burkina Faso citizens form equitable alliances are accepted, but the exploitation is over. Faced behind the scenes was already. A group of financial specialists is working on some discreetly, enlisted from other African countries, and even benevolent European economists started creating the currency's institutional framework. Independence, printing facilities were covertly installed, security measures were produced, primarily in the physical reserves of gold started to build up in a freshly built vault, with strict security below the announcement from the central bank. About these 14 months of preparations unavoidably leaked. Following the first meeting, the financial hypothetical piece was published by the Times. Is Burkina Faso preparing for CFA leave? The article cited an unnamed source. Sources stating that Traore was getting ready to exit the West African Monetary Exchange Union. The French reaction arrived within Jean-Pierre, Minister of Finance, asked to meet urgently within the presidential residence. Traore, the conversation was tough but illuminating. President Traore LLA started. I have to convey France's serious concerns regarding rumors about Burkina Faso's financial. The CFA arrangement's goals served the area well for many years. Any unilateral withdrawal would result in regional unrest and do injury to yourself. People listened courteously before Minister Laire's response would be France. For a different country to possess half of its reserves, govern its finances, and publish its monetary policy that lacks equity in contrast. It is exactly the fair comparison. Traore abruptly stopped what you refer to as stability. We are becoming more regarded as authority. Burkina Faso honors its international commitments. But it is not possible to compromise monetary sovereignty. Change strategies. Maybe there's space for change within the current structure. France is willing to talk about decreased reserve needs or more representation in financial choices as well. Traore responded a bit too late for African countries. Have asked for decades these measures specifically, only to be disregarded or provided token modifications. The period for half measures have been completed since the meeting, finished without a resolution being provided. What seemed to be a warning as well as a President Traore, I have to be careful, that the independence of money, without being well prepared, could result in capital flight due to hyperinflation, and France would not be able to survive an economic collapse. To offer support in such a situation, Traore's reaction was composed, but final. We are fully conscious of the dangers, Minister. We are equally conscious of each country that has accomplished prosperity has achieved this by managing today's following. This conference, using its own funds, the pressure from the economy started global credit rating organizations, reduced the national debt of Burkina Faso, a number of French banks were suspended. Related connections with financial institutions in Burkina Faso, making international transactions more difficult. Reports that a monetary devaluation is imminent caused bank runs as some affluent people tried to convert CFA francs. It was time to convert to dollars or euros. Expedite the strategy. 18 months following the first strategy discussion, 6 months in advance of the initial timetable that Traore discussed the country in a historic transmission. He started today with Burkina Faso citizens. I reveal a move that many have described as unfeasible on July 15th at precisely 1 in a month. Burkina Faso will launch its own independent currency. The announcement from Sankara Franc contained a number of crucial elements. Intended to avoid panic, the new money would first follow the CFA around for it would be a 6-month transition phase, totally supported by stockpiles of gold with each note that can be exchanged for its equivalent and if requested. Gold can be purchased at the central bank. The Sankara Franc would be crucial. Start using a fixed 1-to-1 exchange rate to guarantee pricing stability with the CFA throughout the shift. This is not just Traore gave an explanation using a change of paper money. Burkina Faso is taking back an essential right of any really autonomous country's authority, its own financial future on a global scale. The response was prompt and mostly negative. The French governor Michel Dupont, the central bank, provided a dismissive Radio France interview. The so-called sovereigns international, the use of currency as a political ploy, disregards economic realities. You can't declare monetary independence, please. Without the supporting structures, I promise that Burkina Faso will be able to use this money to feed their kids. These remarks were communicated during a press conference. Traore said the response became instantly recognizable, putting up a new banknote prototype, which Thomas Sankara appeared on one Birkin of gay gold miners on the side. He grinned and added, on the other hand, our kids will at last recognize the actual worth of their possessed riches. As the launch date confronted both enthusiasm and fear, propagated by the government of Burkina Faso. Officials carried out instructional campaigns in villages, schools, and marketplaces, meetings outlining the change procedure and resolving issues with banks ready for the enormous logistical, the difficulty of managing the currencies at the same time. Security troops grew. Alertness to possible economic July 10 sabotage. Only 5 days prior to the planned currency introduction is a significant Burkina Faso's fortitude was put to the test. The IMF declared that it will halt the already authorized loan of $150 million facilities because of financial concerns. Parallel policy developments. A number of foreign banks went under a freeze. Corresponding connections with Burkina, the efficiency of Faso's banking system, disconnecting it from the world's financial. The economic teams networks expected these actions months in advance. They had set up a different kind of banking routes via friendly countries including China, Russia, Ghana, and Algeria that were prepared to keep up financial connections outside of Western-controlled mechanisms for exchanging currencies made certain that necessary imports, such as fuel and medication, could keep coming in. Even more unexpectedly, a number of nearby nations in the CFA region discreetly voiced backing for Burkina Faso's financial autonomy, with some suggesting that they could adopt a similar route if the changeover was successful. Arrived on July 15th with a concoction of tension and ritual in Ouagadougou. Thousands gathered in Independence Square to observe the first official exchange. Utilizing the Sankara Franc, Thier himself bought a basket filled with product from a market that is farmed nearby. Woman making a payment using fresh, clean bills that included monuments that were not European, but historical persons from Burkinabe and landmarks. Our money now stands for our cherishes, our riches and sovereignty, Traore announced to the applauding audience. For since colonial domination, this is the first time we choose our monetary policy in accordance with the Burkinabe citizens' needs, not the former colonial powers' interests. In the weeks subsequent to the practical, the difficulties associated with the currency shift become evident. At first, for a few businesses was hesitant to accept the additional rural income. There were currency delays in several regions. Distribution worldwide, companies asked for premiums in order to accept Sankara francs for business dealings, but the cataclysmic events anticipated by Western economists were unable to bank runs, and modest inflation persisted. Decreased as public confidence increased, most significantly in the gold backing. The psychological effects of financial sovereignty brought about a surge in economic nationalism that increased local manufacturing and less reliance on imports. After 3 months of the changeover, Burkina Faso encountered its first significant financial policy test on how drought impacts food safety in agricultural areas was jeopardized. Stability of prices and security under the nation's CFA system would have few resources to deal with this issue. Any substantial growth of the money supply would need the regional authorities' consent. French central bank dominant Sankara Franc. Burkina's interests, the monetary authority of Faso managed to put specific liquidity measures into place to assistance to impacted farmers and stabilize food markets. The policy was successful in avoiding food shortages as well as spirals of inflation, showing the advantages of money in practice 6 months following the launch as sovereignty. The period of transition came to an end, and the international CFA was completely phased out. Observers started to recognize the surprising triumph of Burkina Faso's Bloomberg published a monetary experiment, contrary to all odds, an analysis of how Burkina Faso is making money from its currency gamble, noting that the backing of gold had gave vital assurance during the period of change. Much more important was the influence on the region of Niger and Mali. Nearby nations with comparable colonial financial records were sent governmental teams to research Burkina. Discussions over Faso's strategy started with the potential for a fresh regional money that is under African authority countries themselves as opposed to former colonial authorities. A year following the Ibrahim's introduction by Sankara Franc spoke at a special West Coast conference, the subject of African leaders in Ouagadougou monetary sovereignty for all region. What we've demonstrated, Traore said, the fact that his fellow heads of state are decision between stability and sovereignty is an incorrect comparison between appropriate arranging sufficient reserves and robust. African countries can have we can each manage our own finances while preserving economic forecasting. The French government, which first rejected Sankara Franc as destined to fail, now took a different tack publicly. French President Martel provided a revised collaboration that would provide more freedom. Within a response of the updated CFA system, Traore was tactful yet strong, which we value. The readiness of France to talk about reforms that were unattainable for 60 years. Before we acted on our own Burkina Faso, however, will not go back to any framework in which our monetary policies are decided to stay outside our borders, willing to collaborate regionally, but only on the foundation of complete autonomy and equality collaboration. The financial information revealed a captivating tale. 18 months following the Burkina Faso's currency transition, the economy was expanding at a rate of 5.2% per year, quicker than it was using the CFA. Inflation that defies grim forecasts remained steady at about 4%. Similar to the majority of developed economies, notably, poverty rates had started to decrease as monetary sovereignty made it possible for targeted development initiatives that had not feasible under the prior system. The currency's gold backing initially, several economists believed that outdated strategy was essential to its citizens of success, who had never trusted paper money, has evolved into a form of money that might, if required, change to physical. This assurance enabled the central bank to progressively lessen the support proportion, as confidence in the currency's reinforced institutional foundation. Traore invited people years after the debut to foreign reporters to the National Gold Vault located beneath the main bank's historic tour was made public. Tidy gold bar stacks that are all stamped with tangible evidence of the Burkina emblem of the gold that forms the basis of the currency is more than just a reserve. Traore clarified. It serves as a representation of a substantial change in the way we perceive our resources from the prior system. Include foreign corporations extracted gold, offered for sale on global marketplaces with little advantage for our people at this time, is the cornerstone of our financial sovereignty that links our natural wealth straight to our financial autonomy. In the global financial institution that had originally denounced Burkina Faso's financial experiments started researching it as a possible resource-rich model. Harvard economists studying emerging countries published studies that examined the Burkina resource-backed currency model sovereignty, including the IMF. In a cautious, the report's language recognized that under particular circumstances, with sufficient national currency reserves can offer benefits of policy flexibility that surpass the benefits of integration, possibly the strongest. Confirmation did not from organizations, but from regular market vendor Aisha Odreo is a citizen. Ouagadougou, who had previously been summary of those who were dubious about the new currency that changed before. We spent money, things had nothing to do with our features, failed to identify structures that we had never observed. Right now, as I hold these notes in the face of Sankara with our own landmarks, feel proud when I realize it has support. Our own gold gives me a sense of security.